Well, we have joining me, African cities are growing at an extraordinary rate, and the continent's transportation sector faces a multitude of challenges, including rapid urbanization, congestion, inadequate public transport infrastructure, and environmental concerns. As cities grow, the need for sustainable mobility solutions become increasingly urgent, and African cities should prioritize creating cohesive transportation networks that allow for smooth transitions between different modes. Technology will also be key to ensuring the smooth functioning of transportation systems, and the continent is experiencing a rapid boom in new transportation and mobility startups. Well, to help us dive into this a bit more is Kingsley, who is CEO of Naraxi, a lifestyle mobile application that offers safe, affordable, and on-demand rideshare, e-commerce, and logistics services. Many thanks for joining us on the show this morning, Kingsley.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, let's begin holistically with the relationship between the need for mobility and transportation as a service in relation to the elasticity of demand around it. How would you assess this?
Obviously, Nigeria is actually growing at a very rapid rate, our population, and transportation is a very key aspect of our lives. I go to the studio using my own private vehicle, but we know that Nigerians need to move from point A to point B. So the demand for an affordable ways for people to move from point A to point B and to also move their goods in terms of logistics is rapidly increasing. So you see this demand driven economy as regards transportation increasing over the years.
All right. Kingsley, now the cost of transportation has remained a huge challenge for Nigerians. How can technology be adapted to manage this rise in cost, in your opinion?
Okay, in my own private opinion, I would say when you look at the cost of transportation, you have to actually break it down into the key components. Apart from the infrastructure that has to do with good roads and security, which the government needs to tackle, holistically, when you look at it, you are thinking of energy cost. People have to fuel their vehicles. When the fuel subsidy was removed last year, we saw over 98% increase when it comes to transportation costs. So if you want to tackle the issue of energy, you have to look at alternative ways people can look for cheaper fuel. You are thinking of biofuel, you are thinking of gasification of our transport sector, or you are thinking of electrification down the line. When you take care of the energy aspect of it, the next thing is obviously accessibility. How do people book this ride? How do transport companies minimize their payroll expenses, which you can use software to automate a lot of things. When you take care of payroll, you are thinking of also security. How do you make sure you are giving great service to your customers when it comes to booking a transport mode or for their freight cost? So you're also looking at using, for example, a passenger counting system could take care of a lot of things. You don't need to hire a lot of people to do work that can be automated. So deployment of technology in the aspect of energy, in the aspect of quality assurance, even safety. You could have like a tracking software for your freight, for your passenger vehicles, to make sure that passengers are always feeling very safe when it comes to your offering as a transport company.
Absolutely. I hear you, Kingsley. You spoke about the different modes and adapting. Many would say the more sophisticated the process is when we begin to look at tech and introduce it into the transportation system, this begins to have some sort of direct effect on the cost of it for the average user. How do we marry both and make sure that it's a little more accessible in light of introducing technological trends?
Obviously, when you introduce technology, the cost could benefit from economy of scale. For example, I will use rideshare, for example. By the time more people are booking more rides, a car could be more productive, or an asset could be properly deployed. So economy of scale will also play a key role in terms of making sure that that cost savings translates to savings for the customer. Yeah.
Okay, well, now as a tech mobility expert, what needs would you say or would you highlight as key to transforming the transportation system?
Like I said before, you could deploy technology in a few key areas. The energy aspect of transportation is where we're actually struggling as transporters. Most of our vehicles are running on diesel, so it would be nice to have a system where government or even private sector players could leverage the fact that Nigeria is so abundant in gas, CNG, for example, conversion, so that when you convert most of our vehicles that we use to transport people from point A to point B, our energy cost goes down. For example, we're spending 50% of our income just to fuel the buses, just to fuel the taxis. So I'm sure a lot of people that go to the parks, I'll give you an example, like the last Yuletide holidays, you saw people, they went to the park and the government had to step in by giving out rebates, which is a step in the positive direction. But you see consumers, they would want something more sustainable, something that will affect their lives every day, because transportation is so key. If you look at Nigeria, it's contributing 3% to our GDP. Yeah, 3%. But if you go to America, it's contributing around 9%, which shows you there's almost a 6% gap on where we are currently and where we could be in terms of closing this gap. So if you solve the energy needs, you can also use software to deploy your service to serve more people. You could also use things like a proper way to collect fares, fare collection system. You can hand over transit cards to passengers to pay for their fares. Government can subsidize fare through those transit cards, and it's more transparent. People could access it, and it's a low-hanging fruit. If you take care of that, the issue of security, that's where you need a proper database system where you can have transporters, cars. For example, a customer could scan a QR code to check if this particular vehicle is registered and recognized by the government before they board those kinds of buses. So if you take care of energy, accessibility, quality assurance, and safety, I'm sure you're going to see a tremendous improvement in our transport sector.
Right, so a lot more robust systems, lots of transparency and safety, which is key. You did mention sustainability as well, which is just as important. Now, it is public opinion, Kingsley, but even with experts, that without proper technology solutions, monitoring and evaluating the transport system may be impossible, which surely also deters investors. What is your position on this view, and how can it be addressed?
Yeah, that particular viewpoint, I share the same viewpoint. We really need to pay attention to our transport sector. We need to properly document, digitize, make it very transparent. And this would really yield so much for everyone. The government could get more revenue from this sector, like I told you before. 9% in America and 3% here in Nigeria. So tax revenue is going to come in there. And investors, when they see that this sector is really lucrative, like if I invest $30,000, $40,000 to get a bus, I have a network where I can put it in. There's a consistent revenue that will come in from this. So it takes off the burden of asset ownership from the government, who has been, like most state governments, they procure buses, and after like a couple of years or 2-3 years, those buses break down. But by the time you have a very transparent system, investors could take off that heavy burden of asset ownership. Then the government could give the regulatory framework for everyone to operate in. So digitizing this sector will go a long way in making sure that everything is sustainable for end users.
This certainly sounds very promising there. But let's bring the conversation, let's narrow it down to your service. Let's talk about Nairaxi and what you're doing differently to support tech solutions in the transport system, and what are some of the bottlenecks you may have encountered through the course of your operations thus far?
Okay, coming to Nairaxi as a company, we're a transport solution company. We deploy our technology in buses, for example, for mass transportation. When we talk about technology, we're looking at things like payment system, routing systems for you to route your network so you could optimize for efficiency. We're also installing for quality assurance passenger counting system to make sure that like government or transit agencies are getting their fair share. We also go ahead to provide ride share service using our mobile application. So when it comes to bottleneck, obviously, Nigeria is coming up in terms of tech adoption. Transportation sector is not really a sector where people really want to jump in. They don't see this as in quotes, the in thing. But we believe that transportation is the cornerstone of every economy. There's a reason why America started its development by building the transcontinental railway, because you really need to connect people. Through transportation, they can connect to affordable healthcare. They could connect to schools. They could connect to almost every sector of the economy. So we are really deploying these tech solutions, and most state governments are coming on board, gradually adopting this technology. But there's also room for growth. There's also room for partnership for us to access funding. We're also partnering with, assets companies in terms of provision of these buses, because we're separating asset ownership and technology. And we're now bringing everything into one single mix where you can deploy a bus, you can deploy a taxi, and you are sure of consistent revenue every month. So bringing all this together at the end goal is for the end user, which is Nigerians. Obviously, that's why we called it Nairaxi, to have affordable transportation from point A to point B.
All right, the promise is great, and great work on your part. Many thanks, Kingsley Eze, for joining us this morning. Keep up the great work, and of course, we hope to have you again on the show.